Hey everyone, thanks for joining. I am joined here by Jimmy Hatzel. I totally forget your new title. VP of Sales?
Revenue.
Revenue.
Right. Close, yeah.
At QuickPass. And Reg Harnish, the former CTO, founder of Autotask, and currently the CEO of Orbital Fire. Today we got a little bit of a spicy debate. I'll try to keep Reg and Jimmy from choking each other to death. But today we're going to talk about, are MSPs the only solution to the cybersecurity problem for SMBs? And I think based upon reading your LinkedIn post, Jimmy says yes, and Reg says no. So do you want me to give you guys like 2 minutes each? You want me to keep a timer or something like that, or you just want to like free the entire time? What would you both of you prefer?
Whatever you think, Connor.
You're the boss.
I'm the boss. Okay.
As you can tell, we're going into this raw. This is a true debate. There's no scripting here.
So for those of you, hey Matt, for those of you listening and watching right now, I have a set of questions that neither. Hold on, my camera is screwing up. Let me turn this off real quick. Hold on. Virtual background. No.
We'll just pause the whole broadcast.
There we go.
No problem.
Look, there we go. For those of you watching, Jimmy and Reg have not seen any of the questions that we're about to ask them. I pulled them from some LinkedIn posts that I found, some LinkedIn posts that Jimmy had and that Reg had. So it should be interesting. Let's keep it civil, both of you. You know, something we should definitely worry about. No name calling unless it's funny. And so if you get a laugh out of me, I'll allow it.
No eye poking. Yeah.
Yeah, no eye poking. So let's get started. I will set a timer. Let me pull that up. As you can see, it is definitely right off the cuff. I'm pulling it up right now. So, Jimmy, I'll let Reg go first. This is your LinkedIn Live, so I'll let Reg go first. So, Reg, are MSPs the only solution to the cybersecurity problem for SMBs?
Well, I think if you have seen the post, you have a general sense of my position on this. I think, first of all, MSPs have become a really important part of the cybersecurity story for small businesses. But I think there's a lot of gray area here. And unfortunately, it's left small businesses with inferior outcomes. And I think it's left MSPs in the lurch because, the industry is really intent on, if you look at the big four, the big 2.5, really intent on selling stuff to MSPs that they need to figure out how to use, sell, support, afford, and make money on. And that model is basically at a tipping point now because, MSPs just can't handle more stuff. And if you look at cybersecurity, it's really become a domain easily as large as technology. So you've got, on average, the average MSP is a couple of employees, probably at break even or losing money on a pretty regular basis. And they've been trying to deal with technology. And now this whole thing of cybersecurity, most of which has nothing to do with technology, by the way, is like a whole new expanse for them to try and become experts in and try and figure out how to make money in. And it's not working. It's clearly not working. But the industry, there's so much momentum from the talking heads to, the big fours. They are all, they've made a lot of money off of selling stuff to MSPs and forcing them to figure out how to make money on this stuff. And so from our perspective, we believe that a partnership is a better model. So we talk about MSSP 2.0, which is Managed Security Services Partner, not a provider. We got to figure out how to stop selling stuff to MSPs and how to start supporting them and helping them primarily to drive better outcomes for customers, but also, and I just made this comment and I kind of like it, MSPs are going to need to figure out how to make this business model jump, or they're going to go back to working at Best Buy. I think MSPs have two options today, and that's it. And I hearken back, and I'm probably going to go over my 2 minutes, moderator. I hearken back to Autotask in the very early days, 2001, 2002, where every IT provider out there was in a break-fix model. And we had all figured out that that was not working. We were in the same situation. Most MSPs were losing money. They were tiny. Scale was impossible. And We invented this thing called managed services. And today it sounds really sexy and attractive. But back in 2001, 2002, 3, whatever, it was impossible to get MSPs to think about this problem differently. Now, in 2002, you either moved to managed services or you ended up working at Best Buy. You died. Your MSP disappeared. We're at the same type of inflection point right now because the current business model does not support asking MSPs to do more.
Awesome. You did go over time. So, Jimmy, I'll allow you three minutes.
3 minutes? All right.
Are MSPs the only solution to the cybersecurity problem for SMBs?
So I stand by my claim, and I look at it from a big picture perspective. So as someone who works as a cybersecurity vendor, right, we make cybersecurity products. I just think that most products are made wrong for the SMB market in the sense that it's too complicated. It's just too much that a small business, say less than 100 employees, even 4 employees or 10, can actually consume, manage, and set up properly. So we give recommendations like, you need good cyber hygiene, you need to, train your employees, you need to do blah, 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 build layers of security, and then there's some technology that goes with it. But the actually deliver of those, of that technology and of, everything surrounding it is just done completely wrong. It's a bunch of cyber vendors just yelling at MSPs or SMBs saying, if you buy my product, you're going to be secure. And realistically, cybersecurity is not a single product. It's an ongoing process, right? They need to continuously improve. And it's just not possible for the overwhelming majority of small and medium-sized businesses to do that themselves. So I look at the problem as a whole. How do we deliver cybersecurity to all of these small and medium-sized businesses on a large scale? And for me, from my perspective, I like your MSP 2.0 or MSSP 2.0 because, I do agree with their background, been at the MSSP trying to work with small businesses before. It has to be through MSPs, and we have to design cyber products in a way that they're consumable for MSPs, that they can be delivered to small and medium-sized businesses through MSPs. So what I'm saying when I say MSPs are the only solution to the cyber problem for SMBs, what I'm saying is cyber vendors need to wake up. And if they want to actually address the SMB market, which most don't want to actually touch it all and just focus on enterprise and then stand there from, a golden throne saying, oh, all these places, of course they get hacked. They don't have MFA enabled. They don't have least privilege enabled. They're not auditing their accounts. They're not doing security awareness training. They're not going to do all these things. Well, you're not making a product that's consumable by them. And for most cybersecurity products, you need a third party. So the MSP is the most mature and most fit organization that we have in this country or in the world, really, that can deliver cybersecurity products, improve processes at scale. I agree with you. We need to lift them up because at the end of the day, if a small, medium-sized business has a cyber problem, they can't call 911, they can't call the FBI, they're going to, type in IT near me, and they're going to get an MSP is going to answer the phone no matter what. So it's going to happen. We might as well support them and lift them up.
Awesome. You actually did that in less than 3 minutes. So good job.
Listen, I do agree. I think not only has the MSP industry abandoned MSPs because they're making lots of money in the current model, but the cybersecurity industry has completely abandoned SMBs. There are no tools out there designed for small businesses. None. If you look at, and I don't want to name any, honestly, but pick any major vendor, not only is it overcomplicated, is it overkill, it's overly expensive, takes armies of people to deploy and maintain. And so part of our challenge has been, and when I talked about the gray area, part of our challenge has been not just figuring out how to help MSPs change their model so that they can make money and produce better outcomes for customers, but also how the cybersecurity stuff that we've developed over the last 15 or 20 years can scale down to small businesses. 99.7% of the GDP in this country lives with small businesses. So think about this. The entire $1 trillion cybersecurity industry is fighting over that last 0.3%. All the tools are built for that 0.3%. It's unbelievable to me. If we're going to solve this problem in any meaningful way, the cyber industry needs to start thinking about how to help small businesses. And then MSPs need to completely change their game because, again, many of them are dying on the vine, or they're just not making money because they just can't consume more stuff, more tools, more vendor licensing, more lawsuits, more all of these problems that have been developed, sort of developed over the last 5 years, because not only does the cyber industry and the MSP industry sell stuff to MSPs, but customers, because they're not quite educated, they're getting more, but they're not quite educated. They're going to their MSP and asking for cyber solutions too. So there's a lot of pressure on MSPs, and they're just, so many of them are just getting ready to break.
So Jimmy, Reg said cybersecurity industry has been abandoned by the SMB. The cybersecurity industry has abandoned the SMBs. Do you view MSPs as a conduit to take those enterprise level solutions and attempt to distribute them in a way that makes sense for SMBs?
Yes and no. I think that the solutions need to be changed to be consumable. So they need to, one, be, at a price point that works for SMBs and be, quick to set up, all of those things. But they also need to work for the MSP business model for that delivery. So I think that you can't just take, your big cyber vendors out there and just throw them on an SMB, or just take your big cyber, take, and I'm just, love the company, but I'm just picking names here. Like, take your CrowdStrike and, if you want to just throw that, and every MSP all of a sudden is going to deliver CrowdStrike, right? EDR, XDR, or whatever it is, it's going to be a problem because it's not set up properly for the MSP business model. They need the multi-tenancy, the truncated billing, like all of the things that you need, the integrations with, Autotask or, whatever, all the MSP tool sets to actually deliver these services. So that's why you have MSPs using different cybersecurity solutions for the majority of the time than the enterprises, and it's not price. People always think it's price. Oh, they can't afford these things. They can't afford these things. They can't afford these things. It's usability as well. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, but the solutions need to be brought down market and be consumable for MSPs and SMBs. I'm giving a shout out. Wes Spencer is in the chat here. With Perch Security, and we did a similar thing at Scout, taking that SOC SIM, that traditional MSSP model that had been around for years and years and years, selling to enterprise companies and selling to mid-market companies, and then, reworking it and retooling it and making it consumable where it's a per user per month price. Like, that's how you deliver better security at scale.
That makes a lot of sense. And folks, put all your questions in the chat. Let's get to the first one here that I saw from Wes. So I'll let Reg dive into this one. Wes would like to know, they want to hear you talk about the conflict of interest in SMBs. Are MSPs just foxes guarding a hen house? And if so, how do we deal with this as an industry?
I think there's two pieces. One is certainly the technology industry is one of the very last on the planet where we don't see some segregation between doing and measuring, right? So contractors have building inspectors, doctors have, malpractice attorneys, and on and on. But in technology, you can kind of do whatever you want. And there's no real sense of accountability beyond the customer relationship and whether or not you're making money. So I'm not even arguing so much that segregation of duties, that's not for me the primary focus here. My focus is delivering better outcomes for SMBs, because anyone who is spent any time in cybersecurity recognizes that at least 2/3 of every framework, every standard, every regulatory mandate has nothing to do with technology. So when you see technology people wandering into governance, compliance, policy developments, response, all of these different areas, it's like, it would be like if you called me and asked me to configure your firewall. Like, could I do it? I could probably pound my way through a sloppy mess, but I'm not the guy. Like, you don't want to be asking me to do that. We see this over and over. Now, most MSPs, in my experience, are good people who just want to do the right thing for their customers. They want to figure out how to say yes and support them. But there are a small percentage out there who will just, their marketing is better than their actual service delivery. But for customers, one of the problems is they don't really understand. They are increasingly investing time in cybersecurity and understanding it. And more we see SMBs coming directly to us without talking to their MSP. So they're coming directly because they recognize that cybersecurity is different than technology. But most small businesses don't really know the difference. And so we've left them with yet another challenge. And so if we agree that one of the hardest things in IT and cybersecurity is sales, right? It's just it's a headache. We have to do better at educating and communicating with our target audiences and distinguishing between technology and cybersecurity, defining our lanes, and then staying in them, because that's how we produce better outcomes, is doing the things that we're really expert in and being confident enough and responsible enough to say, hey, listen, DFARS, yeah, I've heard of it, and I think I could help with the technology, but I'm not really a compliance person. You should really talk to someone who understands these compliance requirements and the language and what it actually looks like. So I think there's a lot of gray area, but one thing I would encourage MSPs to think about, because Orbital Fire is only 2 years old, and we're already 3 to 4 times the size of the average MSP that we run into in terms of seats, certainly in terms of revenue. It's happening. This is going to happen just like managed services happened, whether you liked it or not. So my suggestion, and one of our taglines here is, Mr. or Mrs. MSP, find a cybersecurity partner before your customer does it for you, because it is happening. And the industry is segregating. We're starting to see legislation in different states and possibly at the federal level where this segregation of duties is critically important and is going to be lawfully enforced. So get ahead of the game. Just like back in 2002, if you made the jump to managed services, you probably ended up being more successful than if you just clung, the death grip on break fix. It's like, we need to progress. This model has been around for 20 years and it's a dinosaur now. It's an antique. You need to figure out a better way to run your business.
Yeah, a couple things. Yesterday I was on with Tim Coach. We were talking about MSP versus MSSP, and does it make sense for MSPs to, is it like break fix, MSP, MSSP? And we're like the summary of that conversation, save you the webinar YouTube view, is no. Like an MSP doesn't need to. Like an MSSP, right, is focused just on security services traditionally, right, in the definition that's been used in the enterprise for years. And an MSP is going to be focused on IT services. Now, there's this like gray area, right, but it makes sense to move to a security-focused MSP. Bring the other experts in the room. I've been in those meetings where you're going through a DFARS assessment or whatever it is. The MSP is in the room in most cases. Even with larger companies, they have an MSP in most cases, and they're giving them instructions on how to do it. So just like you said, the MSP shouldn't be expected to do all of this themselves, right? They can't, it's just not realistic to go and learn every single compliance, all the regulations, all the standards, be a master at every single tool, run a 24/7 SOC, and then be a 10-person organization. It's just not possible. So you need good cybersecurity partners. And I truly think that working with MSPs, lifting them up, using them as the delivery system for the majority of these things is the way to do it.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you want to respond before we go to the next question, Reg?
I'm good.
Sweet. So one thing, and actually this leads perfectly into it, is I've had this debate much like you had with Tim Coach. What is an MSP? So I'll ask you, define in your own words a managed service provider. And then I have some people's comments from some LinkedIn posts that I pulled. I'll let Jimmy, you could go first.
Sure. To me, a managed service provider is someone providing outsourced IT services on a managed basis, where there's some sort of managed agreement, meaning they're doing proactive work, and there's certain things that are in scope and out of scope. But the key thing is IT services that are proactive.
So specifically not security services. I want to call that out. Okay. What about you, Reg?
I know the term is used, I think, effectively the way Jimmy just described it, but I think it could be broader. I mean, managed services doesn't. I mean, I've got a crew that comes to my house every week and mows my lawn. That's a managed service. So I do think that there's opportunity to expand the definition, but I think the way we've used it and the way it's become entrenched is basically what Jimmy just described. It's an IT specific function, and it delivers services and hopefully outcomes, which I don't think we talk about enough, but delivers services in a way that's predictable, continuous, and proactive. But I'm not sure I'm happy with the definition.
Well, you have the rest of the LinkedIn Live here to figure out what you want that to be. After that, your decision's made. You had to move forward. I remember when I was first getting into the channel, I was very confused personally. I heard MSP, MSSP, and people would ask me, well, who do you work with? Who do you want to work with? And my answer was always both, because when I looked at the people calling themselves MSPs and MSSPs, there was not really a difference. I mean, now I would run across a few companies that only did the security services, and that was very far and few between 3 years ago. So I remember just being really confused about that as well. A comment I pulled is somebody said, if you aren't managing your client's risk, you aren't an MSP. But it sounds like that wouldn't fit in either of these definitions here, given the only risk is the IT risk, which is smaller than the cybersecurity risk.
Well, I think you can be an MSP who is risk fluent. But I think when it comes to looking at risk exhaustively, because it could be someone slipping on ice in the parking lot, or it could be, exposure of, global admin credentials. I think MSPs, again, I'll go back to my first comment. They have a very important role in cybersecurity, because if the cybersecurity provider is designed well, they essentially have zero access to the customer environment. And I believe in that very strongly. And that's how we are modeled. We literally have no access to a single thing at a single customer. And we rely on the managed services provider to do that for us. So it's truly a partnership. Like we can't operate effectively without an MSP or some kind of IT component there. And I think that's important because, one, why introduce residual risk? Why introduce another persistent connection to this stuff where we're all being targeted, of course? And the MSP is already very good at technology. I'm generalizing. So for us, we want the MSP to continue to focus on the places where they are already experts in doing a good job. Things like configuring a directory or MFA or encrypting endpoints, that kind of thing. Like, we don't get involved in technology at all other than to assess, test, measure, and monitor. That's our job. The MSPs that have come to us, I'd say about half of them have been very skeptical because their relationships with their customers are volatile, and maybe they're not really confident in the work that they're doing, and they're small and they haven't been making money. But they come to us because they're ready to throw their hands up. Like, they have figured out that they've got to do something differently. They can't continue on the path that they're on, even though the industry is just, all of its weight is pushing on this antique model. But when they do make the leap, I think they're very quick to see the benefits of that. So, for example, as the cybersecurity provider for the SMB, we're now the first call when there's a suspected issue. And we take on the accountability and the responsibility for resolving incidents. Now, technology is obviously a very important part, but we could be talking about communicating with law enforcement, crisis communication, legal, regulatory oversight. There's so much else that could potentially go into a response scenario. Oh, and by the way, we have responded in our careers hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of incidents. And in fact, some of the biggest, most visible incidents you've seen or ever heard of in your life. Like, we're the team that has responded, not Orbital Fire necessarily, but us and our people. And so we have these experts working in their lanes, all for the same common goal, which is, how do we manage risk for the customer? The MSP is focused on technology, including cyber technology. And the cybersecurity provider, and I don't even like to use the term MSSP because it also has a lot of,
it's a loaded
stigma. Yeah. But if you have people working and experts in their areas, you're bound to produce better outcomes for that. Now, the way I sort of define the jurisdiction is, imagine that you have technology and you have cybersecurity. But if you Venn diagram this stuff out, where they overlap is cybersecurity technology. And I've mentioned a few things like MFA. We don't do MFA. We're going to measure, make sure it works. We might be monitoring it. We're certainly going to test it on an annual basis. We're going to assess it for compliance and for, just general defensibility. But that shouldn't be our job. Like, we're not MFA experts. We know what it's supposed to do, but we don't literally care if it's Duo or MFA or a hamster wheel. Like, we need to enforce and prove that we have better resilience in authentication, but we really don't care how it's done. That's our job, is to take these compliance mandates, frameworks, all of this other stuff that's out there, translate that into common tools, tactics, and techniques today, and ensure that the customer's got enough of that so they can get insurance, that they can positively respond to supply chain questionnaires, that they can earn their next customer who is contractually mandating that they have certain things going on. Like, that's our job. Like, we have no place in actually BitLocker. Like, we don't care if it's BitLocker or if it's anything else. We just want it to do the job, and that's how we define the jurisdiction and the lanes. That's how we segregate duties, going back to the initial question. And that's how we produce better outcomes for our mutual customers.
Yeah, I think just going back, Connor, to your original point that we didn't mention cybersecurity as a defined duty, and when we both defined MSP, which is an interesting thing, and we should probably break that down some more. But cybersecurity as a separate function or a separate industry as a whole is a relatively new thing. If you look at the the scale of technology, IT services, it used to encompass cybersecurity, and now the cybersecurity that we were doing back when IT services encompassed cybersecurity wasn't all that great, but it was implied that cybersecurity was part of IT services, and now it's not. But it's not for certain things, right? Like patching, right? That's implied in IT services. That's one of the most important cybersecurity services that you can do, just keeping your things up to date, right? MFA, right? Actually delivering the MFA, that's implied in IT services that's going to happen. SOC services, SIM services, governance, aligning to standards, auditing, that's the stuff that's not implied in IT services. But there's this big gray area because there's no list. Like, this is what's included, this is what's not included, and this is what we all agree on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Two things about that. Reg, I really want to know what hamster wheel MFA is. Really, is it like that company that does the lava lamps to do randomization of, I forget who does that, but that's what I'm getting, some pictures like that. But Jimmy, I got a question for you. It's sure. Basically Reg is stating there's this partnership between, we could debate MSP and not MSSP, but a security services partner, an SSP, let's call it that. Do you think what is currently a managed service provider can fill both of the camps that Reg is talking about, or does it actually need to be two separate organizations that Reg is mentioning here?
Yes and no. Really large MSPs, national MSPs may, open up a division who does that in-house, but for the most part, I believe that the two need to work together.
That makes sense. Yeah, if you see the large MSPs that are acquiring others, they're often setting up what they call an MSSP that does all of the security services for their portfolio companies. I've seen that 3 times already from enormous managed service providers. The question that I had, Tim, if you bake that into a question, we'll get to a shared responsibility matrix. Can software and education fill the gap between cybersecurity needs and the safety small businesses need? Can it fit most of it? Can it fill none of it? Does it actually have to be a separate partner that does this for small businesses all the time? I'll let Jimmy, you want to go first?
I mean, in some cases, in very few, you may have someone who used to be a director of IT and is starting the business, and they can manage it while it's a micro business. And maybe someone hires in-house IT pretty early. But the overwhelming majority, they're going to need a third party to come in and manage third-party services, software, and vendors. They're fourth party, right? Let's call them fourth party. Realistically, the MSP's job has shifted into a lot of expertise and being the person you can call if you have a question about cybersecurity and IT. They're not going to have the answer to every single one of those problems, so they may need to call their expert on cybersecurity or their expert on a, very specific IT issue, which is normal. I would say at scale, the answer is no. Software cannot solve this problem. You need expertise. There's not enough. There's a giant shortage of cyber talent. It needs to be delivered on a managed basis. MSPs are the best way to do it.
That makes sense. And Reg, you mentioned earlier this partnership. Does that partnership between multiple companies creating security services and normal IT services create confusion for the client? Are there too many cooks in the kitchen? What has your experience been, and what do you see changing moving forward?
I think there's a lot of confusion. I don't know if that's the root cause, but I think it contributes to confusion for SMBs, many of which who really are, when we think about sales and business development being one of the most difficult things that we do, part of it is because the consumer, the small business in this case, feels like they can't make informed decisions. They're paralyzed because there's so much confusion and so many options and so much gray area and maybe conflicting information. And so I think if we're going to serve our mission, all of us, MSPs, cybersecurity providers, the folks who are directly customer facing, I think if we're going to do a better job there, part of our responsibility is educating and defining for customers is some of these things that they're going to need to consider as part of their business plan, right? Like, so technology, it's no longer optional. Like you could probably build a business without computers and networks, but you're probably at a competitive disadvantage. And I would argue the same has become true of cybersecurity, where if you think about the two things that we do, resilience and defensibility, if those two concepts are not built into your business plan, you're probably at a competitive disadvantage. And so the industry is changing so quickly. Hype and hysteria tend to, make headlines rather than things that are more important. I think we have a responsibility to educate our customers, not only what we do, but what they should expect in terms of outcomes and what is it worth it to them? Like, we got to define it and translate it into terms and language that they really understand. I love right now that most small businesses that come to us for one of three reasons. It has nothing to do with their MSP. They either are trying to renew their cyber insurance and they can't, or they're getting supply chain questionnaires and they're going to lose one of their biggest contracts if they can't show some proof of a cybersecurity program. And the third, which is probably the most exciting and important, is as they're out prospecting, doing business development, selling their stuff, their potential customers are asking about cybersecurity now. And so these are things that are completely understandable. Like, small business decision makers understand sales. They understand getting insurance for their business. They understand. So I love these are business drivers that are forcing small organizations to make direct contact with us. So that's happening, but I think we can help. And I think it's part of our responsibility. And some of that's going to mean a little bit of soul searching and assessing your pride and your ego and maybe your current revenue streams. Because just because you're making a couple $100 a month net on KnowBe4 doesn't mean you're producing outcomes for the customer. KnowBe4 is one company I will mention because I'm anyway. So if we look at what awareness training, and I call it security cultural development, but it's essentially changing behaviors in users, right? We have to figure out how to change the decision-making process for users at large. KnowBe4 doesn't do that. But just checking a box and saying, hey, I'm delivering, this generic awareness training doesn't do it either. So we have to be, when I talk about swallowing a little bit of pride, I feel like it's time to reassess, figure out what your jurisdiction is, what your responsibility, what does your lane look like, and really focus on doing an amazing job there, rather than trying to, fix chainsaws and maybe deliver a pizza along with your Active Directory configuration. I think that's going to be really important, and there's a little bit of a gulp that's going to have to happen, right? Because you may be walking away from a little bit of revenue in the short term to produce a better MSP in the long term.
And to create more security as well.
Well, I think that comes from outcomes. I think, and listen, these are not secrets. If you look at any of the industry statistics and reports around profitability and viability, most MSPs are sort of hovering at that survival line, right? And it comes from fragile relationships with their customers, increasing expenses from their third-party vendors who just love selling them stuff, accountability, liability, and a whole bunch of other things, right? So they're kind of hovering at this survival line. And I think if you want to do something better and different, you're going to have to do something better and different. Like that's kind of, the psychology of this whole process. Again, going back to 2001, when we were helping folks try to migrate to managed services, because we kind of knew that break fix was dead. Programmatically, if you're a break fix provider, you only make money when your customer has a problem. So you're directly misaligned with your customer. That direct misalignment is happening again today in cybersecurity, because the customer expects that you're a cybersecurity expert because you didn't tell them that you're not. And maybe you didn't know that you weren't, or you're pretending that you are and you know that you're not, or, there's a whole bunch of area in between too. But I think we have to do a better job of educating and helping them make informed decisions about their options. Now I think that's the first part. The second part is, as a cybersecurity industry, because the frameworks, the NIST 53 is 1,189 controls. Do you think a 25-person physician's practice is going to consider 1,189 controls? Same thing with everything. There are no frameworks out there for small businesses. And you might say, what about the CIS controls? Okay, well, there's 135, I believe, sub-controls. Come on, that's not only is it just not feasible, but it probably isn't necessary. When you think about the surface area of a small organization, one of the things I get excited about is, for a small manufacturer, healthcare practice, even a small credit union, like, we can actually make a meaningful difference. Target, GE, Boeing, they have zero hope of ever securing their infrastructure and their data, because there's just too much. There's too much surface area. There's too much change. There's just too much. But small businesses, we can actually make a huge difference. Well, we have to change the mindset and approach this a little bit differently.
I think the reason that I work in cybersecurity specifically with MSPs is because I truly feel like I'm making a difference. Like, it gives me purpose in my work. I've said that before. It's, I've talked to Connor about this at length. You said it before. The majority of the majority of employees, people who are employed in the United States, are employed by small businesses. So it's this is, if we're working on cybersecurity for SMBs, that's protecting the economy, that's protecting jobs. Somebody gets hacked, it could be the closing up. That one statistic is totally made up. There's no actual source to it, that 55% of businesses close after a year of a cybersecurity incident. Never been able to find the actual source of that one.
It's nonsense. It's complete nonsense.
I think it was 54%. Yeah.
If you keep trying to find the source, you'll just go back and it'll source back to articles that it sourced the other one. It's just a circular one. But it is true that building out good cybersecurity and doing it in a way that makes sense and can be done at scale, like you're doing, like we're doing, work with MSPs, there's purpose and meaning to the work because it is protecting the majority of the American workforce and the world too.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. Not only is 99.7% of our GDP small business, but over 60% of all employees work for small businesses. This is the elephant in the room. I feel like it's the cybersecurity industry, which I'm part of. So I take responsibility for some of this. We've just completely ignored this massive problem because we're making tons of money off of enterprise. And we've all benefited from that. But it's, if we really want to, change the equation and fix the problem as we say we want to, we have to do some other things.
Wes asks, Reg, tell me how you really feel about Nova 4, but we can skip that question.
You mean Nova 3?
Yeah, Nova 5. So Jimmy, I got a question for you.
Okay.
How do we begin educating businesses that there's a difference between cybersecurity and IT? So it seems like a common theme that we've been talking about for the last 40 minutes is there needs to be this separation between cybersecurity services and IT at some level if you don't have the expertise in both areas. Now, everyone here is aware of like the marketing engines that sell the next buzzword. They just like MXDR, and I've seen like MMXDR, and I'm sure there's other marketing machines cooking up different acronyms to this day. Everyone gets confused, even the people in the industry, and it just doesn't help actually at creating security or good services in general. So how do we begin educating businesses? There is a difference. And then I think that's where we need to start to hold each vendor accountable.
I think it has to come from the MSPs. I think the MSPs are the ones who are already the trusted advisors. They're already working with the businesses. They're already ingrained in the community. They're going like, I'm not going to be able to go to the local, Chamber of Commerce meeting and speak to all the business owners, but the MSP owner is going to be doing that every single day in every single town. So I think for us, making it very easy for them, making the product consumable, making education in a way that actually makes sense. And an MSP can say, listen, we're going to take care of your IT and your cybersecurity, but we're going to work with a couple partners who specialize in cybersecurity to do a couple things here. And they need to have that honest conversation. You don't need to white label everything. All right. You don't have to pretend that every SOC provider is actually you and you're actually a 400-person company when you're 3 people. Like, no, like be smart about your risks. Say, listen, we partner with this cybersecurity vendor because they're the best at what they do. The same way we partner with software. If you have a really bad incident that happens, we're going to do everything we can to prevent that from happening. But due to the cyber risk the way it is, we have this company set up already, and they can help us respond and help you get back up and running and take care of things, communicate with insurance companies, communicate with law enforcement, all of that stuff.
I completely agree. There's, again, statistics are tough. So there's somewhere between 30,000 and 300,000 MSPs in this country, right? And you already are the primary customer-facing element. There's only one orbital fire, and we can't find too many others. So it's got to start with the MSP. And I think before you start that conversation with your customer, there's a little bit of Zen that needs to happen. I think, whether it's, burning incense and chopping a chicken's head off, but there's gotta be a recentering here, because I think it is going to be scary, just like it was 20 years ago, where if you are an MSP owner or decision maker, you're going to have to say, what's the next phase of our company? What do we actually look like? And how do we succeed? How do we deliver on our mission? How do we produce better outcomes for our constituents, the people that we say we're trying to help? How do we do all of that? Some of that may mean a contraction. Some of it may mean deleting a revenue stream from your P&L. Some of it may mean changing your messaging and your brand and what it is you stand for and what vendors you work with. And a lot of I think there's going to be some pain and suffering in the very short term. But I also think, and I know that if you're a progressive MSP who is committed to doing a good job, this is a clearly better, more productive, healthier, more profitable path. And any improvement takes, you want to make an omelet, you got to crack some eggs, right? So it's about that commitment. And I think the MSPs that we work with who are truly bought into what we do and how we work, they sleep better at night. They're not worried about those, open XDR events flooding in at 1:30 a.m. They're not worried about lawsuits. They're not worried about, because they've stepped out of that lane. that they probably shouldn't have been in the first place. Not shouldn't have. I mean, everyone makes their own decisions. I'm not trying to make it sound like that. But there's a healthier, more profitable way forward. But it's going to require some changes. And I think those changes, because most MSPs are very small, it's a very, a tight-knit group. It's very personal and very emotionally personal at times. I think there's going to have to be some recentering and an acceptance of, we kind of headed down this path, didn't really work out, but it's tough to succeed without some failure. So I think there's definitely a realignment, and then educating customers has got to be part of their playbook. It's got to be part of their brand, and part of their messaging is, hey, listen, you know how we built better customer relationships? We started saying no. We started talking to our customers about all the things that we don't do and shouldn't do and can't do, and then helping them find partners. We're obviously we like to think we're the only one out here, but there are other folks who are trying to accomplish the same thing. I think you want to find a partner that can help you with this, and someone that you can trust, not only to do a good job, but to prop you up too, prop the MSP up and support them, and drive all of that technology revenue and all of that labor revenue back to the MSP. A partner that's going to stay in their lane. If you're doing all of this work, encourage you to be out there looking for who can this be? Because at some point, IT and cybersecurity are going to be completely separate. We'll never have this conversation again. No one will ever conflate them. Just like we don't conflate IT with payroll processing or hosting anymore necessarily. I mean, it's just a different, we've all sort of settled into our lanes. Cybersecurity is new, and we've got some work to do, but eventually, and I don't think it'll be that long. I'm talking about a couple of years. Customers will only go to cybersecurity providers for cybersecurity. And so I think MSPs who really want to capitalize on that, build better relationships, and become more profitable, it's a good idea to start doing that now.
So, Reg, Wes is in the chat saying he's upset that you and Jimmy are so cordial, and he'd like me to ask. Jimmy said he was talking crap about you the other day, and that he could beat you in a foot race. So, what do you say to that, Reg?
Hey, listen, if you've figured out the timing, Jimmy's probably 25 years younger than me. I'd put my money on Jimmy too.
You'd throw the race, is what you're saying, just for a little bit of money. All right, got it. Wes has his answer now.
Can we address something that was happening in the chat, Connor?
Yeah.
Some people were talking about how it's very difficult to white label services, or even that they don't white label services because the vendors aren't, will go direct, and people will go direct to that company. I think that the burden there needs to be shifted on the vendors, and vendors, cybersecurity companies need to do a much better job with this. I think, personally, if we're actually going to solve the cyber problem for SMBs, we need to be able to work with MSPs, because they're going to be there every time. And if you're a cybersecurity company who's coming in and the first chance you get, poaching your way around, cutting out a vendor out, or cutting out an MSP out of their, cut of the deal, or, sell through, however it's structured, you're doing it wrong. It's going to hurt you in the long run, because at the end of the day, the MSP is still going to be there in the room, helping make these technology decisions. And if you're the one going around them every time, they're going to be like, no, don't use those people.
So I have personal experience with this. A few vendors we've talked about on this call, I won't name them, are doing exactly that. And what I've seen from the MSP community is it's still 50-50, is that half of the MSP community loves to work with them, and the other half, who this happened to, like a client got stolen or access got removed or the contract got snaked out, that other half is not vocal enough at hey, we as an industry, if we're going to be providing these services and we're not going to white label so we can promote additional transparency, additional security, the MSPs need to get together as a community and say, all right, we're not gonna work with these people moving forward en masse, or something needs to change about the way they do business if they like to sell through the channel. That's what I would say about that. But
it's going to be a tough job. Listen, those are well-funded organizations with huge installed base and a lot of momentum. You know, and it's clear, obviously, through the most recent massive transaction that we've all experienced, that the only way for these organizations to grow is to acquire small businesses, turn multiples, and force their current customers and new customers into selling more of their stuff, pushing more and more through the MSP. And you got to ask yourself, I mean, how much can you do? Like, how much can you take on, especially when those vendor licenses continue, the price continues to increase. They're competing for the same organization, right? Not uncommon to see that. And they just, this idea of more and more and more is, you know, there's limits to it. Yeah, at some point, it just doesn't work.
Absolutely. So I got a question, Jimmy, for you. If MSPs are the solution, what's one thing that needs to change?
Cyber companies need to embrace MSPs as they need to either come to the realization that the fact that the MSPs are going to be the delivery method and they need to fix their product so it works for MSPs, make it consumable, or they need to embrace the fact that in most small business deals, there's going to be an MSP involved in the situation. And however the software is either built or managed or whatever, it needs to work in a way that MSPs can work with it.
Awesome. And then for you, Reg, if MSPs are not the solution, what's missing that needs to be put in place?
Well, let me just add some color to Jimmy's comment. That's never going to happen because we live in a capitalist market. So as long as those vendors are making their numbers, producing dividends or multiples for their private equity partner, that's never going to happen. It would require a real shift in things. But I think if MSPs are not the solution, we've hit on a few things. Education is important. I think some of the responsibility does lie with small businesses, meaning if a small business, whether they're in healthcare, finance, manufacturing, doesn't matter, if they want to continue to be viable, they have to recognize that the ground is shifting underneath them to some degree as well. And so adapting to these new important things like defensibility and resilience and compliance and other stuff, they're going to have to get educated themselves. They can't expect their MSP to have all the answers. I think that's going to be important. I do think MSPs are going to have to reset, find partners, and figure out what their lane is and what success looks like for them going forward over the next, 5 to 10 years, whatever that is. But I also think there needs to be more orbital fires. Like, we can't do it all. And I it's partially a facetious comment, but partially there's really just not a lot of people like us out there who are exclusively working with small organizations, like 25 to 250 employees, sub 20 million in revenue, simple data architecture, shallow supply chain. Just not, we don't run into competition ever. And so there needs to be more of us. Like, we can't handle all 32 million small businesses. So, for us, we're sort of evangelists for this new phase, this new model, this, sort of managed security services partner experience. And hopefully we get enough traction where it makes sense as an industry to make those changes. So I think we have responsibility. The MSP has some responsibility. And I think the small business, the customer has responsibility in this too. I think we all have to we have to all be willing to take that first baby step towards that and, kind of test the waters and see that if it's working or if it's not, tweak, change, whatever, and then just continue towards a better model. Because who's really going to suffer? Yes, MSPs are going to go out of business, but who's really going to suffer from this if we don't adapt and overcome is the small business, because there won't be MSPs around. Half of the MSPs on their block are going to go out of business. They won't have the options. And same thing with cybersecurity. We're at risk too. Like, if we don't, as an industry and a consumer, shift to a more healthy, profitable, productive arrangement of these pieces, I think we're all at risk.
Makes a lot of sense. Do you want to say anything there, Jimmy?
No, I mean, this has been good. A lot of great conversation here. I love the chat too. Shout out to everyone in the chat. You kept the conversation going.
Yeah, it's distracting.
Back and forth.
Some of them are even having their own conversation and we're not even involved in.
There's a bigger argument in the chat than there is between us, and we're the ones supposed to be debating.
Yeah, maybe Wes is, stoking the fire behind the scenes, showing us what real incendiary talk should be like. So awesome. I do have a few more questions if you want to keep going, but I do know we're about at the time limit.
We could take one or two.
Let's do one more.
Yeah, one more.
So this came up 4 times already today. How much of the MSP industry has been driven by the vendors behind it that want to make more sales?
100%. That's easy. Next question.
He's going to come in with 99, right?
Yeah, a lot of it. I mean, a lot of it. It's really big companies driving a lot of this. So
maybe that's the topic of the next one. Is changing that. Do MSPs need to be their own vendors, or can they actually use partners, like not service partners, but vendor partners too?
I think it's just there's so few technology companies that are set up properly to work with MSPs. That's why a few companies have a stronghold on the entire industry.
The 2.5 that Reg mentioned. 2.75. We'll call it that. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Wes and Dave. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for
this is great.
letting me moderate, even though I didn't have a timer set up. So things weren't as structured, but I thought it was a really, really good conversation, even though y'all didn't end up yelling at each other, which is what I was hoping for. I almost went to Target and got the Rock'em Sock'em robots and like taped a Reg's face on one and Jimmy's on the other. I wanted to do that and just play in the background, mute myself while y'all were debating, but didn't end up making it out there. So maybe for next time.
This is awesome. And I think this kind of debate is important because, while we have sort of adopted our own position and our approach to this, we're not pretending to be the only opinion or the only expert here. And I think it's going to take all of us to figure out what makes the most sense if we're all going to survive and thrive in this industry and do better things. I think we need to be challenged, and we need to challenge MSPs to come up with better answers. So I think I love this, that we're participating in a conversation like this. And I just think we need a lot more of them.
I completely agree. Looks like a lot of people in the chat do too. So for everyone in the chat, let's organize more of these, not only yourselves, but any one of us here, Jimmy, me, Reg, would love to be a part of that. Or I also took a ton of notes. So a lot of information will be making its way out in the next week or so on exactly what we talked about. And maybe with some funny photos. Maybe I'll put Jimmy and Reg with 2 boxers and we'll make it happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the time. Honestly, we truly are grateful for these kinds of forums and hope it was helpful.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Yeah. Bye-bye.